Ukraine strongly protests the so-called autumn draft announced by Russia from October the 1st to December the 31st, 2025. Ukrainians under occupation were urged to avoid this process, said Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. The enemy plans to recruit 135,000 men into the army, in particular on the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine, in Crimea and parts of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhzhia and Kherson regions. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs emphasized that this violates international legal obligations, in particular Article 51 of the IV Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilian persons in time of war. The article categorically prohibits the occupying power from compelling persons under its control to serve in its armed or auxiliary forces. Compulsion to serve in the army of the occupying power is a war crime and will not go unpunished, the ministry said. It is noted that the Kremlin will definitely use the recruits as cannon fodder in the war against Ukraine, thereby exposing them to mortal danger. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs emphasized that Russian conscripts have every right not to comply with and sabotage the criminal decree of Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, and Ukrainians are urged to surrender to the defense forces in case of forced mobilization. In this regard, we call on Ukrainians living in the temporarily occupied territories to avoid this criminal conscription in every possible way. In the event of involvement in the war against Ukraine, we urge them to take advantage of the opportunity to be saved through the I Want to Live project and voluntarily surrender to the Ukrainian Defense Forces, the statement reads. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs also appealed to Ukrainians living in the historical Ukrainian lands, Kuban, Starodubshchina, northern and eastern Slobozhanshchina, within the modern Krasnodar territory, Belgorod, Bryansk, Voronezh, Kursk, Rostov regions of Russia, with a request to remember their roots and not to participate in the war against the homelands of their ancestors. Representatives of indigenous peoples of the Russian Federation were reminded that Russia's invasion of Ukraine is not their war, but Moscow's. Moscow is throwing you to seize Ukrainian lands, just as it once seized your lands, and killing you en masse, so that others can live on your lands, the diplomatic agency emphasized. The ministry noted that Ukraine continues to document all violations of international law by Russia. The evidence will be used to bring the Russian military and political leadership to justice. The MFA called on the international community to increase political, diplomatic, and sanctions pressure on Russia. Let us recall that there is serious dissatisfaction with Russian rule in the occupied territories of Ukraine. Here, most men prefer to surrender to the Ukrainian side rather than be forcibly recruited into the Russian army. Such cases are already occurring and are expected to become widespread. Russians are worried about such situations.
Police in London arrested several demonstrators who gathered in the city centre on Saturday to oppose the war in Gaza. According to Associated Press, police and the UK government had urged those planning the protest to postpone it, after a terror attack on Manchester's Heaton Park Congregation Synagogue on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, killed 2 worshippers earlier this week. Some politicians and religious leaders claimed pro-Palestinian demonstrations, which have been held regularly since the war in Gaza began, had played a role in spreading hatred of Jews. The protests have been overwhelmingly peaceful, but some say chants such as, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," incite violence. Others, including Jews who support the protests, say they want a ceasefire, an end to the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza and the release of Israeli hostages held by Hamas.